Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Need to Know. I'm Bryce Abel, and I hope you're enjoying your holiday season and you've got some good memories planned. I've just returned from a trip to Vienna and Munich to do a few Christmas markets, buy a couple of presents, and I think I'm just about over jet lag, although my family and I did have a small kitchen fire last night at dinner that we've contained, but there is that to think about. Now, today is a special edition of the show. My regular co-host, Richard Dolan's not here. But Rich and I will be recording a Need to Know early in the year where we're going to be looking back on what happened in 2025 in the world of UFO UAPs. And we'll be looking ahead to 2026 to see if we can make any legitimate predictions. But today, I'm joined by a special guest. Two things are going to happen in today's show. The first is we're going to take apart the trailer for that new Spielberg movie, Disclosure Day, that just dropped its trailer. And we're going to take it apart shot by shot to see what might be in store when the entire film drops in 2026 on June 12th. The other is I've got a special announcement to make about something that I'm very excited about. And actually, I have reason to believe you might be excited about it too. So, quick thought about Disclosure Day. The trailer got over 17 million views in 2 days on YouTube. Now, compare that with the trailer for Avatar Fire and Ash, which got 34 million views, but in 4 months. So there's something going on here. Interest in this new film and Disclosure in general seems to be very high at this point. I mean, also, it was just a few weeks ago that Dan Farah's Age of Disclosure dropped, and it's broken some records of its own. So anyway, let me talk about my special guest. Many of you know that back in the day, I created or co-created a dramatic TV series for NBC about the UFO cover-up, and it was called Dark Skies. We made 20 hours of that show. It starred Eric Close, Megan Ward, the late J.T. Walsh, and even Jerry Ryan before she became 7 and 9 on Star Trek. My co-creator was Brent Friedman. He's turned into a lifetime friend and a collaborator, and I'm pleased to announce that he's joining us today on Need to Know. Hey, Brent, welcome.
Hey, Bryce. Thank you. I have to say, I am a day one fan of Need to Know. I've kind of always imagined maybe one day I'll be invited to be on the show. And here I am. So very excited to be here.
It's probably not that big a deal, but I appreciate the concept anyway. Listen, I'm happy to see you on the show. But frankly, it was kind of touch and go because if I'm not mistaken, you've been living the life of a survivalist for the past few days up in Washington State. So I take it you have the power back on because there you are.
Yes, we are back in the 21st century. It was touch and go for a while. We lost power for, I think, 3 days. So no power, no water. I live on an island up near Seattle, and you get some really strong winds and storms. We had 80-mile-an-hour winds that took down some trees, knocked out some power lines, and yeah, everything was semi-apocalypse for 3 days here on the island, waiting in line for hours for gas for your generator, and everything's closed. Where do you get food? It was a nice little trial run for the end of the world.
Well, I know what you're talking about. I mean, I've been evacuated 3 times over fires down here in Southern California. I think it's kind of the new normal that we all have to be kind of prepared for. So let me ask you this. So this trailer drops, were you able to see it when it first came out, or did you have to wait?
I found a way. Nature always finds a way. I found a way to see the trailer because I had been waiting so long. I think like anyone, that's a fan of Spielberg or UFO movies. This promises to be, an event film, I think. And the fact that it's coming out in the summer implies that it's a big summer blockbuster. So the minute I heard the trailer dropped, I scrambled and found a cell signal on the island and watched it.
I mean, it was kind of exciting. And if you take a look at the social media, it certainly got people's attention. There's been a lot of debate about it. And I'm not sure that you and I are actually going to bring truth to the whole thing because it's meant to be mysterious, clearly, as you watch it. Although preceding it, and I think we'll be able to roll this in the edited version for YouTube, there were a couple of billboards, if you will, one in New York and one in Los Angeles that broke before the trailer that were very odd looking. The first time you looked at it, you went, wait, what? What? It's a big eyeball, but it was actually an eyeball turned upside down. And, just to, well, you saw them. What was your first take when you saw those billboards?
I was intrigued. I have to admit, my first impression was, oh, it's our alien overlords watching us, right? And then I stared at it longer and started to analyze it and look at it. I thought, okay, there's a lot going on here. This feels like a Rorschach test, where it's like, okay, everybody try and read their own view of what this image means. I think it also, in my mind, it kind of mirrors what I would personally believe disclosure is, which is it's not black and white. It's not straightforward. And that image is certainly not straightforward.
It was it was definitely not straightforward. Also, I should point out, the image on those billboards, as I understand it, was different in New York and Los Angeles. So two different versions of it. And just so everyone understands, yes, it's a very close eyeball kind of thing where the eye is, there's stuff in the eye, there's lights that reflect in the eye, but the face is upside down. So it kind of, when I first saw it, my first take was, is that somebody on an operating table? Is that an abductee or an experiencer? I don't know that I've changed my opinion about that. I don't think anyone's actually explained it. And I had no idea they were about to drop the trailer when they did. It just popped up, and it was, it's kind of funny because trailers these days have taken on the whole role of just, it's almost as anticipatory to see the trailer as the film. And it's kind of interesting because that's why we're doing the show here today. We're treating the trailer as if it's a big drop. So I realize that most people who are watching this are saying, oh, if they're doing the Disclosure Day trailer, I've seen that. I want to see what they have to say about it. But then there's always people that haven't seen it or heard it if you're listening to this on a podcast. So why don't we, it's only 2 minutes and 7 seconds long. Let's go ahead and play it so everybody can sort of get their head in the game, and then we'll come back and talk about that. So let's take a look at that now.
If you found out we weren't alone, if someone showed you, proved it to you, would that frighten you?
Good morning, Kansas City. Let's take a look at today. Today is today's.
People have a right to know the truth. It belongs to 7 billion people.
What is it?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you. So I'm gonna show you.
What are you gonna do?
Full disclosure to the whole world. All at once.
People keep wondering. Encountering the unknown.
They're coming! They're coming!
They are starved for the truth.
Do you think there could be others?
Why would he make such a vast universe? Yet save it only for us?
Well, the trailer does not disappoint. It's a smorgasbord of UFO, UAP ideas and concepts, many of which you've probably heard of before. but presented with Spielberg's own inimitable cinema mastery. I mean, this guy is the best in the business at creating both a mix of wonder and dread. And that's what I took away from this trailer. And I'm excited to dig into it and start to try and read the tea leaves and make sense of or predict what we think might be coming for us in the movie itself.
Me as well. And it was interesting to see it because, boy, a lot of ideas were floated. And in anticipation that we were doing this show, I ended up watching it many times. And then finally I said, okay, no matter how many times I watch this, I'm not going to have the brain power to remember the specifics. So I literally watched it with a pencil and a pad of paper and stopped it every few seconds and wrote down what it is. So we'll be getting into that. But before we do that, and we are about to get into this thing, let's talk about our little announcement because it concerns both of us. And the one thing I just want to point out to everybody is that, as I said, Brent and I go back a long time to that NBC series, but we've remained collaborators and friends forever since. Kind of like going to war to make a TV series about an alien invasion. You sort of had to. We were experiencers of something for sure. And here's the deal. We were at that time when this was airing on NBC, we were exposed to what appeared to be an approach from the government about a potential deal. But I'll let Brent, why don't you just explain what that means?
Well, literally someone came out of the shadows at our premiere party and proposed that we work with the Office of Naval Intelligence to help with slow drip disclosure. And in exchange for working with them, we would be essentially read in and shown all of the secrets, and we would then figure out how to weave them into our TV series. That's what they put on the table.
They did indeed. Now, we've been talking about this in general terms for years, not in detail, but that's about to change. What happened is I started to write a book because I sort of felt like, it's that time where I should sort of lay the record out. And I showed you the proposal for it. And you said, this is fine, but we could make a podcast out of this thing. And we ended up setting up a deal to make a podcast about our experiences making that series, the idea that we were approached about a deal, and other people who might have been approached about a deal. And I guess our big announcement is this. Brent and I are going to be doing a 36-episode podcast for iHeart Podcasts. It'll start at the early part of 26. The actual date is not set yet, although it soon will be. And if you'll pay attention, we'll be telling you here and on social media. And so I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride already. We've started to record some episodes, and I think we have a really cool plan. We're going to take you on a wild ride. And as Bryce was saying, this all kind of began around Dark Skies, but it's actually carried through and had ripple effects for the last couple decades up until even just recently. And, that also includes, stories and experiences that preceded Dark Skies. So there's a lot of material here, hence 36 episodes. And we also have a really interesting format that we're going to be using Hollywood movies and TV shows, which, we are Hollywood insiders, as it were, to look at and examine the UFO phenomenon and the history of, or the evolving narrative of ufology, and use each kind of episode, take a movie or a TV show and use that as a portal in to also talk about our own experiences. So it's going to be very different than anything that's out there. It's going to be, both personal and philosophical and crazy, because some of the stuff that happened to us is just completely unexplainable.
I'm afraid that I buried the lead. Did we even mention what the title of this is?
We did not. You
Okay.
go for it.
So here's the deal. The title of the new podcast is Sound, Light, and Frequency. And you're probably looking at a little graphic right now if you're watching on YouTube. Sound, light, and frequency is not something that comes initially to you, although you could think of it as, if you're going to make a movie or a television series or even a podcast, you're involved with sound, light, and frequency. But we don't want to spoil our own coming podcast, but we should give you a little hint about why it's called Sound, Light, and Frequency. I'll let you run with that one.
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but suffice to say that the person that came to make the deal proposal to us mentioned in the course of that first meeting that sound, light, and frequency were the secrets of the universe, and proceeded to give us something to kind of elucidate that. And, for years, we kept being fixated on what does that mean, sound, light, and frequency. And I think over the years, certain things have come into focus, and we've done some analysis on the artifact that we were given. And I think, that's all going to be, a running subplot in the 36 episodes. So excited to dive in. And I think even what we're about to do here with, kind of going in and analyzing and looking at this trailer is just a little preview. It's a little taste of some of the kind of the approach we're going to take with not so much detail as we are here to sound, light, and frequency. And so, like I said, it's really a very different take on ufology and the phenomenon than I believe is out there right now.
I can't wait. And I know we need to get into the Disclosure Day trailer, which we're about to do. But one of the things that I think is interesting is over the years, I've been guests on other people's podcasts. And of course, I did Need to Know for years with Ross Coulthard, and now I'm doing it with Richard Dolan. And, people always say, well, you're a Hollywood guy. What's going on with Hollywood and UFOs? And then the conversation is very short and barely an hour, if ever. I've been on Coast to Coast, and it's been a short little discussion. Well, folks, we've got 36 hours we're going to fill. There's a lot we're going to be talking about, and we have been in the research mode. Well, I like to say we've been in the research mode for a quarter of a century, but
Yeah.
we're in a serious research mode right now where we're rewatching all these films. We are we're calling people up and asking them questions, and we're sort of building our database and all that. So that's that. Maybe we'll have a few more comments at the end. But what we're going to do right now that's kind of interesting for this trailer, because it was so densely packed with information, visual and audio, that we broke it into 4 little sections. So what we're going to do now is just play that first section of this 2-minute and 7-second trailer, and then we'll talk about that. So let's take a look at that right now.
If you found out we weren't alone, if someone showed you, proved it to you, would that frighten you?
Good morning, Kansas City. Let's take a look at today. Let's. Today is. Today's.
Okay, that's about 45 seconds. I hope we don't go 45 minutes talking about it. We'll try to keep it a little condensed here. But again, some of you just heard it on the podcast, so we'll describe what it is you saw as we go through this. But the very first shot is Josh O'Connor, the actor from Challengers and The Crown, where he plays the role of Prince Charles. He's walking into a very dark home. And I that really didn't give me much of a hint about anything other than it's a mystery thriller. But the audio version of it says, if you found out we weren't alone, if someone showed you, proved it to you, would it frighten you? That's kind of interesting.
Very provocative. And I think this is what everyone, I suppose, behind the scenes keeps saying is so possibly, terrifying about disclosure, is that it will create ontological shock, right? That idea that once you hear the truth, everything changes and you can't get on with your life. And that seems to be the subtext of what that line is. And yet they're showing you that image, if you aren't watching on video, with a bunch of deer outside staring inside at you. And the deer don't look foreboding. They're deer, first of all, but there's a sense of not calm, but there's no threat. So that's the first takeaway I had, which was that this is not something necessarily to be scared of.
Maybe I have a minority report on that. When I first saw that, I went, well, there are 6 CGI deer there. I mean, they don't look actually real. And again, I don't want to be too hard. As we know, this may be the trailer, and that may be the shot where it stands right now, and maybe it'll even be better in the movie. Who knows? But I would say this. If we accept it as its own thing, then there are 6 deer standing outside, and it's a little creepy to be in a dark home looking outside. I think he's with Emily Blunt, but it might be one of the other actresses. And he's looking out at these deer, and okay, they could be deer, but on the other hand, we have been told over and over by abductees or experiencers that sometimes there are cover images. So, for example, owls occasionally are told as if they are screen memories. So my mind immediately went to, are these 6 deer actually deer, or are they cover memories? Did you even think that when you saw it, or how'd you relate to that?
I did. I that did cross my mind. I've had experiences with owls we'll keep that in the sound, light, and frequency bucket. But the thing is that even if you imagine that you're looking out at, let's say, aliens, right? It didn't seem threatening to me. Look, I do think there are other aspects of the trailer that we'll get into that feel a little bit more threatening. That initial, though, image to me felt like, okay, this is creepy, but there is no reason to be scared necessarily. So that was my takeaway.
Well, it is I mean, look, if you were in your mountain cabin and a single deer was outside your window staring in at you, I think you'd be saying, honey, get over here. We got to look at that. But if there's 6 of them, well, it's a different level entirely. Okay. Yeah. Another shot that's in there. It's a very short shot, but it's a hand holding a crucifix. And that comes right after it. Now, I was a little unclear as I saw that. Why would Steven Spielberg be putting religion into this so directly? Does he have an angle? And then another thought occurred to me. It's clearly a nun holding this crucifix. And nuns, of course, are Catholics. And the one thing that I've been aware of ever since I wrote After Disclosure with Richard Dolan is that the Catholic Church, if any religion on earth seems to be on the leading edge of being able to accept that we're not alone, it might be the Catholic Church, because they have put out various statements over the years that sort of imply that the universe is a very large place and it doesn't undermine their religion if there are other people in it. So there's the Catholics, there's also the Mormons, but in this movie, he's not talking about Mormons, he's talking about Catholics. So do you make anything of Catholics being put up there in this image?
I didn't go as deep into the Catholic analysis as you did, although that's incredibly valid. I was just more focused on, okay, this movie is going to have a spiritual angle, right? If you think back to Spielberg's other movies, Close Encounters, right? E.T., um, even War of the Worlds, that there wasn't any direct or obvious spiritual component to it. By just showing a hand on a crucifix and by having nuns watching it, like it's immediately you feel like, okay, this is going to try, I feel, and incorporate religion and religious beliefs into Disclosure, even if it's just on the impact level, meaning
Sure.
How will religions incorporate or assimilate the idea that we are not alone? But I also think that, you know, to segue into some other aspects of what we saw in that first chunk, interestingly, for me, the big takeaways were in that first chunk that Disclosure is not going to be coming from a president or from government officials standing up and giving, you know, at a podium somewhere in Washington, D.C. It's going to come through humans, in this case, a weather reporter, spoken by aliens or non-human intelligence, right? That they are going to be the ones that disclose. And that's always been a theory within the UFO community, which was, disclosure can't happen because humans don't have the whole story and wouldn't even know how to bring it forth, right? And it frankly, anything that came out of Washington these days would just be half the people would believe it and half wouldn't, right? So
pretty much.
So it's going to need to come from if you don't mind the reference, a higher source. It's going to need to come down from on high. But going back to the spiritual angle, Emily Blunt does not look like she agreed to this.
No.
That she looks like she's being taken over. And that you could interpret that as possession. So, you've heard people, various abductees saying they lost control of their body, they had missing time, and which implied someone else was controlling them for some period of time. But in this particular case, it evoked, movies that I know I've seen where people are possessed and suddenly speaking in another voice that happens to be very non-human. Yeah. And so I think then you mix that with the shot to nuns watching it. It raises the question, is part of disclosure going to be that these are angels and demons or aliens?
Boy, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said.
Or both. Yes. So
right.
I think that's all on the table here, as far as I can tell.
Well, okay. A couple of quick hits based on that. When that little girl sits up in bed, she looks a little AI herself, I thought. She didn't exactly look totally real to me, but I'm sure she is. But I wondered who she is in the story. It's not very clear, but then there are birds and deer sneaking into her life. Maybe she's just referencing, Spielberg tends to want to tell stories that involve children and their ability to perceive or their point of view. But then they cut to a scene where a cardinal flies in the window and stands on a table in front of the actor Wyatt Russell. And I will say this about the cardinals. Often, like we talked about, it's been the owls that were the sort of the ones that accompanied stories about UFOs or aliens or possessions. The cardinal, though, I know this because I ran a show called The Crow Stairway to Heaven, and so you did a lot of research into the afterlife kind of thing. There are a couple of things. There are actually cardinals in the Catholic Church. That's a thing, and they wear the red vestments and all that. But across many cultures, including Native Americans, the cardinal does have a symbolic significance. It's often interpreted as a messenger to the spiritual world. So clearly, this spiritual thing that you're talking about is a thing. And there's a saying, I believe, that says cardinals appear when loved ones are near. So not quite sure how that's going to go into it, but the bird's red plumage is really maybe a symbol of hope, vitality, and renewal, according to those writings about it. Now, I don't know if that's how he's going to use it, but ladies and gentlemen, there are cardinals all over this trailer. I mean, it is a running theme of red cardinals. Okay, having said that, though, let's abandon red cardinals. We'll come back to them as we go through this thing. And the main thing that happens in that first 45 seconds that we just are discussing right now is Emily Blunt is a weathercaster in Kansas City, and she starts talking, and she also is in a hot red dress. I don't know if red is a thing for this movie, but there are red birds, and she's in a red dress, and she says, "Good morning, Kansas City." And then she's obviously distressed, as you point out. Maybe she's being possessed or whatever. It was fascinating because, okay, she's clicking. These are clicking alien sounds or whatever. And I thought of you when I first saw this, Brent, because one of the things we did in Dark Skies is we literally hired a UCLA linguist to create a language for aliens that we put into Dark Skies. And it's a hard thing to do. It's one of the things I think I learned is tread carefully when trying to have aliens speak verbally or anything, because it can look silly. And one of the things we had as a problem in Dark Skies is the aliens were speaking in their alien language, but then they wanted to reference an actual person, and they had to say their name, and then that kind of took you out of it. So I don't know. So it did remind me of the Hive, which was our alien group in Dark Skies. And the other thing, it's weird. I mean, she is clearly under distress, and she's a local weathercaster, which we're going to get to toward the end of this review. But I found that kind of bizarrely compelling. I mean, I want to know more. Why is this happening to her, and why her?
Well, and even for me, like, why that language, right? It definitely feels alien. But in truth, I remember the first time I was exposed to a version of that language was in a movie, I think back in the 80s, called The Gods Must Be Crazy, where you hear the Zulu language, right, which is a bunch of pops and clicks and whatnot. And additionally, there was a movie in 1996 with Charlie Sheen, a UFO movie, an alien movie called The Arrival, where the aliens spoke in the pop and the click, right? So that there is some precedent for this. And, you know, like you said, we created our own language. The Klingons in Star Trek had their own language. And I think that it's just one of the ways in which you can make that moment feel like it's coming from, again, a higher source, some much higher intelligence that has what sounds like a more sophisticated language than we do. What I found interesting is I went back and watched that moment over and over again with headphones, and it sounds like I can hear her saying through the alien speak, "Don't be afraid." Right.
Wow.
Which then circles all the way back to our first point about, you know, if you learned all of this, would you be scared? Right? Would you be afraid? And I think it sounds to me like the first words out of her mouth are, "Don't be afraid."
Which is kind of crazy, though, because she's clearly afraid in this thing. I mean,
she is, but everyone watching it, I think that the idea is calm. Don't take this the wrong way. We're doing this because we have to. This is the only way to communicate.
Well, there are a series of shots at the end of that sequence. First, you have all the people in the newsroom watching this dumbfounded. Then you cut to people on a plane watching this dumbfounded. Then you cut to nuns watching this dumbfounded in a convent. So there's a lot of people watching this. Now, the thing is, I have a confession to make. As a young man who was also working in local TV news, I often did the local weather. So I sort of was in Emily Blunt's shoes there. And I'll tell you one thing. I never had the sense that anybody other than a few people in Eugene, Oregon, or Tucson, Arizona, where I worked, were actually watching me do the weather. She looks like the whole freaking world is watching her do the weather in Kansas City. What's going on? Are they really watching a Kansas City weathercaster in real time, or are we to believe that somehow that thing that happened to her has now gone viral? What, did you have an interpretation on that?
I did, and there's a couple things I want to bring up because you mentioned everyone that's watching that, seemingly watching that moment, but there's one shot that really threw me, which was somebody watching it on a flip phone.
Yes, sir.
Right. And so then I started to wonder, wait a minute, is this set in the past? Because flip phones went out around 2000. Well, they stopped being in vogue around 2010. I don't know how many flip phones are even in existence anymore, which is interesting. And so that's a whole different matter. But there's a line of, at some point in the trailer about, getting the truth out to 7 billion people.
Right.
Okay. Well, but there's more than 7 billion people on the planet today. Well, but there were 7 billion people back when flip phones were in vogue. So I have a feeling it's in the past, but I also think that if a higher intelligence can take over Emily Blunt and speak through her, they can turn on every device on the planet. Right?
That may be.
So it doesn't matter that not everyone is tuned into the local weather forecast. If everyone's screen sitting on a plane suddenly turned on at the same time and a transmission came through, that would get people's attention, right?
Sure would.
And so I think if you go back into 2010, whatever, a lot of people had devices or were near a device, right? You're in a coffee shop, the screen comes on, right? So think about how many screens are out there. And if you were walking down the street and you saw people gathered and everyone was staring at screens, you'd go find a screen. So I have a suspicion that that's how this worldwide instantaneous disclosure is going to happen.
A couple of thoughts. First, there are actually flip phones making a comeback, though, because I think Apple's got, but they're the full screen kind of things.
Yeah.
Clearly, the flip phone,
say it 3 times fast.
Yeah, that they showed in that clip was one of the older ones. You raise a couple of great comments, particularly about the 7 billion. So let's watch our next sequence. This is about 30 seconds following where we just took you.
People have a right to know the truth. It belongs to 7 billion people.
What is it?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you. So I'm going to show you.
What are you gonna do?
Full disclosure to the whole world. All at once.
Okay. Well, first of all, just to wrap up the phone continue the phone conversation. In that first scene, the first shot of that sequence, there are a bunch of people outside a window looking in someplace. There are a bunch of lights on, and one of the people is holding an iPhone. So the theory that somehow this is in the past or whatever, obviously we may be jumping around time frames if that's the case.
Although, interesting, like let's say that you were accurate and that of all those phones, only one is an iPhone. That was actually representative of around 2009, 2010. iPhones came out, right? But they were expensive and they were not the norm. So, I'm just very curious to see what the advantage of making the story set around 2010, let's say 2012. Why would you go back in time to tell this story, right?
If
at the
indeed
same
that's
time,
what they're doing.
But at the same time, if it isn't that, then why is he saying 7 billion people? And why is there a flip phone with an antenna on it? Right? Like there's the things that evoke the past. So maybe there's flashbacks. I don't know. But the other thing is, and this is why I love the internet, is there are already all these theories about why 7 billion. Well, back in time is one. Another is that, 7 billion people on the planet are human, and 1.2 billion of the 8.2 billion that we currently have are not. They are the aliens that are living amongst us. Now, there's one theory about those are all the leaders, right? The elites. It's like, well, I don't think there's a 1.2 billion elites on the planet. I hope not. But at the same time, I think there's just so many different ways to interpret this. And this is honestly one of the great things about the trailer, right? We've all seen trailers where we go, oh, now I feel like I've seen the whole movie. I've got so many questions coming out of this trailer.
Sure.
The anticipation is incredibly high to see like how it all fits together.
Well, as long as you're going to bring up the topic of elites, let's talk about the shot that comes after that. I mean, again, you're right. Josh O'Connor says people have a right to the truth. It belongs to 7 billion people. And just to put a fine point on it, most people can think we have 8 billion or more right now. There's some question about whether the Chinese are undercounted or whatever,
Right.
but nobody thinks anymore there's only 7 billion.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's such a specific thing to leave in a trailer. If so many people would have seen that trailer that somebody would have said, hey, Stephen, really there's 8.5 billion people out there now, but nobody did that. And that's in the trailer. So you tend to think there's meaning to it. But on the subject of elites, there is that, well, you get a couple of locations in this trailer. The first one is the television newsroom kind of affair where you see all the screens. That was in the last sequence. In this sequence, you see what looks to be like some ultra high-tech headquarters for somebody, whether it's
Right.
Majestic 12 or MK Ultra or somebody else, a player to be named later. But there's Colin Firth, who's walking toward camera in this thing. And behind him, I mean, you don't feel like it's 2010 in that thing. That thing looks like, okay, this is big time technology deployed about something. And the one thing I noticed as he's walking toward us in that moment is that there are 8 different faces that are being shown, that are featured.
Yeah.
Now there are screens all over. I mean, the screens is a thing in this, but on those screens, in a place where we can all appreciate them, there are 8 individuals by face, headshots of these 8 people. And I don't know exactly what that means, but it's followed by the voiceover of Josh saying, you wouldn't believe me if I told you, so I'm going to show you. So
Yes.
don't know what he's actually going to show her, but that was, well, let me just ask, did you have an interpretation of what that location was supposed to be?
My brain went to the same place as yours. I thought of, on Dark Skies, we built Majestic 12. We built the
Right.
headquarters. That was our hub set, if you will. That was the bridge of the Enterprise for us. But it was the 60s, so it was as high tech as it could be at that time. This feels like a serious, more technological version of Men in Black headquarters. Men in Black, of course, being a movie that Steven Spielberg produced. And so when I saw those faces up there, I thought either they're keeping track of people who have been abducted, or they're keeping track of people who know too much, or they're keeping track of aliens. Your producer, Tyler, right before we went on, pointed out there are also shots, if you zoom in, of UFOs up on that wall. So this feels like UAP central, right? It feels like this is the space that we've all imagined the government secretly has, where they're tracking everything. Again, it makes me think of that headquarters in Men in Black, where they knew everything that was going on the whole planet from that hub.
And on that, Colin Firth is in one of the immediate shots after this. Looks like he's in a dentist chair or something. I don't know exactly what he's in, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for Colin. He's overlooking the HQ from this room. So the HQ is all behind him, but he's in this, I know it's not a dental chair, but it's obviously a chair where he's being somewhat restrained. It looks like he's getting ready to remote view something or be possessed, but he's got little thingies attached to his head. He's got a mouth guard in, and he doesn't look happy. Although I don't think he's doing this, whatever he's doing under duress. It seems like he's doing it. It seems like what they're implying is he's walking because he knows he has to do this thing. So whatever that thing is. So I don't know what to make of that one. But it's
I have a theory.
Okay, please lay it on me, brother.
Here's my theory, is that there are certain people in this movie on the planet whether they be a child, or people who have maybe a genetic predisposition or open-minded, whatever, that can communicate naturally with the alien intelligence or the NHI. I will bet that the government has a technological process to speak with them as well. And that's what he's doing, right? My mind immediately went to, he has been told in his, in the middle of his, high-tech control room, disclosure is coming. They're going to tell the world. And he decided he wanted to talk to them and say, no, please don't do this. Like that was immediately where my head went, was that he was getting in communication with them. And it was a process, a technological, painful process, the equivalent of a Dixie cup and a string compared to direct telepathy from the NHI.
I buy that. That makes, now that you said that, that's exactly what it feels like to me. And I had just read the book Above Black by Dan Sherman, and he talks about in the 90s where he was working for the military, and he was one of the guys that was put into that program, and that he was in charge of communicating, not as directly, but I mean, so it evoked that. But I will say there is another shot right after the dental chair shot where you're looking straight into the eyes of Colin Firth, but weirdly, they're all black when you first see them. They're just, it's like they're human eyes, but they're all black. There's no pupil or any, they're all black. And then the blackness kind of goes away, and then you see his regular eyes. So it's black to regular in reverse. And so I don't know what to make of any of that, but it's intriguing. But one thing I will say is, let's hear it for the Cardinals, because in this 30-second sequence, they get to come back. Emily is looking at a mobile of it looks like paper
cardinals,
paper cardinals just floating around there. And so suddenly, not only are red cardinals sort of flying into people's bedrooms and that kind of thing, but somehow the concept of red cardinals is a thing. Now, I don't know that I suppose there are mobiles of red cardinals out there in the world right now, maybe. I've never seen one. And I doubt that it's in there because it's an accident. So they're trying to say something, but for the life of me, I can't figure out what they're saying there.
I think it's what you mentioned before, which is that this is a motif. This was intentional, right? It wasn't an accident. I think it also gives more credence to the idea that this is going to be a more spiritual movie, because religion, relies on icons and metaphors and symbols, and clearly the cardinal is meant to symbolize something here. So it's just everything means something. You've got 2 minutes, and it's like poetry. Every shot was intentionally crafted and thought out, not just for the movie, but in terms of what they wanted people to start thinking about in terms of anticipation of the movie. So one thing I want to jump to is the eyes. What, again, I took that is that is a moment where you're being taken over or possessed by the alien presence.
Right on.
And that when that happens, they are now in control of your body, and they can shapeshift, because we see some evidence of that in moments later. And as you said, whether that's a screen image or how they explain that scientifically, I don't know. But I feel like that idea of shape-shifting aliens taking control of humans living amongst us, that is something that, for instance, has, David Icke, the author in the UFO space, talks about the reptilians being the ones who can shapeshift, right? And he's got a whole take on how, the Babylonian Brotherhood, I think is his term. Those are the elites, right? Those are the people that are running the world behind the scenes. They are all shape-shifting reptilians. I don't know that that's where this movie is going, but I do think it's interesting. It feels like they are saying that there is this possession element, there is this shape-shifting element, there is this ability for the non-human intelligences to come in and take control of animals, of humans, of technology, whatever they need to come in and deliver their disclosure message.
And all I will say is the last shot in that sequence is Emily Blunt looking extremely sweaty and possessed. So it's a disturbing image that ends that. And so that we don't, we're not here at 5 hours still discussing a 2-minute trailer. Let's go to our part 3 of that and take a look at what we have.
People keep wondering, encountering the unknown. They're coming! They're coming! They are starved for the truth.
Do you think there could be others?
Okay, well, it's getting into action movie
Yes.
zone here, but and that's great. There's car crashes. There's a car driving through a farmhouse. There's, by my count, again 8, not 7, not 9, but 8 cars driving through a field outside the farmhouse. There's Emily screaming, they're coming, and the black ops guys are running into a motel room with their guns drawn. So there's all of that stuff. But the one that you and I really have to talk about is that opening sequence. That's
Yes.
a crop circle being built in real time. I think it's CGI, obviously, but it's still a crop circle, and we have some history with crop circles.
Yes, we do. It's so interesting. When we made Dark Skies in our pilot, we have a crop circle sequence. I'm not going to go into how or why. However, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to create a crop circle static, not one that you're seeing being made, but just an actual crop circle. And we took a production crew up to Newhall Ranch, which is north of Los Angeles, and we tried to create a crop circle in a big wheat field, and we couldn't. I mean, we tried to do the thing that you've heard debunkers say is, oh, you can just take a piece of wood and, flatten everything, but it broke a bunch of the stalks. And then so people walked on it, everything got kicked up and it looked like a big mess. It didn't look like a crop circle. And so we actually had to have the art department pre-build, flattened out stalks and lay them around in a path so that people could walk on it and it would feel like it still maintained its integrity. All of which is to say that during that experience, we also had a very interesting conversation with the director of our pilot, Toby Hooper, who happened to have been a very good friend of Steven Spielberg. Toby has passed away, and he told us an incredible story that related to Dark Skies, ufology, Steven Spielberg. And that is actually something, to tease Sound, Light, and Frequency that we will be talking about in more depth.
Boy, and that's a great moment. All I remember is that we proved one thing. We proved that making a crop circle isn't as easy as people think.
No, it took a whole art department to pull it off.
Right.
And even then, if you only looked at it from certain angles, did it hold up?
Yeah, but it looked good. And I'll say this: the pilot, it looks grand. I'm very happy with the way that turned out. Okay, a couple of quick thoughts on this part 3. There's a couple of sequences. First, there's one where I believe Colin Firth slaps his hands together. Mm-hmm. Cuts to Eve Hewson, I believe, slapping her hands together. So I don't know what the magic slap of hands is all about, but I do know it's followed by a shot where you're looking at this blonde woman as this guy walks behind her and the camera's tracking around them. But as it comes around the other side, it isn't Eve Hewson anymore. It's Emily Blunt. So right. Is that shape-shifting or what is that? What's going on?
That, to me, I read that as shape-shifting. I read the clapping, right, where one person claps, another person claps at the same time. That's a representation in my mind of the hive mind, right? Once once the alien presence is inside you, you can all do the same thing at the same time, right? So there's a little bit of pluribus in there if you're watching that TV series, but also it's Agent Smith and his cohorts in the Matrix, where they can just assume control of anyone at any time, right? So that when you're looking at another person, they can just, in the blink of an eye, become Emily Blunt, right? Once those people are online, once they are, turned on to the or connected to the alien intelligence. That was my interpretation.
It's a good one. I like it. We got one other quick look in that sequence to the HQ, the headquarters. It's a room with 1,000 screens. And one thing I noticed is there's so many screens, they break them down into B1, B2, B3, B4. So there's screens everywhere throughout that thing. And that's the one where we also see actor Coleman Domingo right after that. And he says, people are hungry for the truth, right?
Yeah.
Which, of course, pretty well describes our audience here. We're all hungry for the truth. So in terms of hitting the sweet spot and making a movie that people who at least I hang out with are going to want to watch, it seems like they've done it. And then Eve Hewson at the end of that sequence says the other thing. Do you think there could be others? So the only question I had for you is when she says, do you think there could be others? Other what? Is she talking about other alien life forms or what? What did you have?
That was my first thought was, are there other humans that can interface with aliens like Emily Blunt appears to be doing? My next thought was, no, it has to be, are there others? Are there other alien intelligences out there than besides the one that is communicating with them? Now, again, we're not given enough information, but that feels like, a reasonable speculation. I want to circle back, though, to one thing you said to clarify a specific word. The full quote, which was my favorite line in the whole trailer, was, people keep wondering, encountering the unknown. They are starved for the truth, not just hungry, starved. Right. And I think that is, again, why I would reason there is a strong spiritual component to this movie, because I feel we are, as a civilization, starved not just for the truth, but for a higher meaning, a higher purpose, right? I think you could make the argument that religion and spirituality has lessened over the last couple decades, right? And people have become so fractured. And I think if you imagine Steven Spielberg in his life and his career, this is maybe one of the last movies he'll be making. I don't know, but it's towards the end of his career. What kind of movie does he want to make? I think he wants to make a movie that discloses that no matter how dark and bleak things seem at the time, we are being watched over. There is something out there that is going to feed us what we are starved of, which is understanding, truth, comfort, and so I feel like that also, in a personal way, describes my own life. Like I have had, I'm an experiencer, and so I've had so many things that have happened. I feel like I've encountered the unknown many times, and it makes me starving for the truth, right? So I am going to be right there. If this movie is one of those ones where it opens on a Thursday night at midnight, I'm going to the Thursday midnight screening.
I'll go with you. I may even fly up to your part of the town. I think you hit it right on the head about Spielberg. I mean, he is a man of a certain age. I'm not sure exactly what his age is. It could be, is he over 80 or is he 70?
I think he's early 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. So
he doesn't look like it. He looks like he's in.
No, he looks great.
Like he's early 70s. Yeah.
He's a powerhouse in Hollywood and all of that. But he has revisited this topic many times over the years. I mean, from Close Encounters to E.T., he did War of the Worlds. He's given us a lot of different aliens. I worked for Spielberg on his Taken miniseries, Talked UFOs with Spielberg. He's been thinking about this forever. He's, as you point out, he's a producer on Men in Black and Falling Skies. And so he's a lot. So I kind of watched this the first time and said, this is probably his summation. This is his closing argument, if you will, about what is really going on, because why would this not be? If you're over 80 and you get to make a big movie like this and you call it Disclosure Day, you got to disclose something. So we don't know exactly what he's disclosing, but if we watch these last 25 seconds, which I think we should right now,
Yep.
we may realize that spirituality is going to be a part of this film. So let's take a look at those.
Why would he make such a vast universe? Yet save it only for us?
Good question. Good
Question asked by a nun.
Asked by a nun. It's like, I think there's a quote from Contact, and it's like, if we're the only people in the universe, it would be an awful waste of space or something.
Yes.
Along those lines. And I think that he's kind of reaching into that area. Okay. The hands touching each other certainly evokes Michelangelo. Okay. But you observed something I didn't even see the first time. So go for it.
This is, to me, there's a lot of interesting shots in this trailer. This is the most interesting, bordering on weird. It appears to me that hand, the two hands that are touching, one is human and one is a doll's hand, but it does not look alive. It looks like some sort of artificial prosthetic or something. So to recreate that famous painting by Michelangelo in such an interesting, kind of almost profane way, because that was supposed to be the divine touching the human. What am I to take from that? Very fast. Again, this is just another thing that, provokes a whole series of questions in my mind as to what this all means. How does this all add up?
So totally. There's by the way, there's a little bit of Emily and Josh on the run. There's a little bit of car chasing. There is something that I don't know what it means in the same way that the doll, if that's what it is, means, which is at the second to the last shot is Emily Blunt holding some kind of object that's sort of self-luminous in a very crowded room as everybody's watching. So that was another one where I slept on that one, woke up and still didn't know exactly what it was. Is it a communication device? Is it, what's your take?
I'm going to bet that the earlier shot we saw of Josh O'Connor opening the backpack, like he's going to say, he says, I'm not going to tell you what's going on. I'm going to show you.
There you go.
That is an alien artifact that he somehow has. And it is some sort of communication tool. It's a way to, because if in that shot, she's holding it and there's other people looking beyond her. And I'll bet that it's some way for people to have a direct communication with or bring down, like, what is the CE5 technology of psionics, where you bring down, you make a connection with the non-human intelligence. I suspect that's what's going on there, right? And because it certainly didn't look like an Earth artifact. It looked, by the glow and the colors, it had a little iridescence to it, like it was some sort of alien technology.
We did something like that in our Dark Skies first episode too. Little device that Harry Truman has while camping at Roswell, and he's able to. Okay, a final thought on those last seconds. We do get the reprise of the Cardinals. The Cardinals just keep coming back. There's a shot in the middle of it where a deer confronts what I think is an AI girl, but I bet is a real person, but confronts her in her bedroom, where we do see there's a Cardinal mobile. So the little girl's in that bedroom with it now. Emily Blunt had looked at it earlier, but there's one live Cardinal in the room, one live one with the mobile. Don't know what any of that means, but the last shot in this thing is that little girl and a deer and a Cardinal approach a lit house in snow at night. And to be honest with you, if this wasn't a creepy Steven Spielberg alien movie, it looked like a Christmas scene.
That's what I thought. Yeah, like a Currier and Ives painting or something.
Yeah, I'm looking at that going, it's all context, folks, because that could be very strange. So, well, listen, it's taken us about an hour to get through all this thing, but let's let's throw out a few concluding thoughts. As you looked at this thing, what's your take overall? Are we going to be in for something in June that's going to be perception altering for the world?
I don't think it's going to be perception altering. I don't think that if anyone thinks this is going to be actual disclosure or a substitute for actual disclosure, I think they'll be disappointed. But I do think that it's going to be a message of hope. My sense is that, again, there's one other moment we didn't touch upon, but just the idea that you have our main characters as fugitives on the run, with being chased by ice-like black men in black, armed men in black suits and black vehicles. It appears that the antagonists or the villains are the government, that they are the ones who, in their high-tech control room, are trying to keep a lid on things, and that the aliens or the non-human intelligences are coming in to enlighten mankind because the secret has been kept from too long. And the government is doing everything they can in that 11th hour to try and put the genie back in the bottle. So I do feel like that narrative that the government is bad guys, the aliens are good guys, and if we can just open our minds, we will be given a message of hope that we are not alone, and that is something that I'm guessing in this type of movie is meant to maybe help condition the populace to being open to whatever disclosure comes our way.
It's interesting when I first, I think when we first heard about Spielberg doing this movie, I don't know about you, but my first thought was, is this going to be a movie where we open on Steven Spielberg on a chair in an empty room, and it's black and white, and he looks at us and he goes, "The film you are about to see is based on the truth. There is a real spacecraft in this and real aliens." So I didn't see that. But it certainly has import. And you talk about the government. I remember an interview that Spielberg had done where he apparently had a first draft of Close Encounters, which was at one time called Watch the Skies, and it didn't have that sort of government element to it, and that it was added later. And of course, you remember the government is staging what looks like some kind of plague event up in Wyoming. And Roy Neary is like, who? And he gets picked up and he goes, "Who are you guys?" Right? And it's the government. Well, think about E.T. There's a government group out there with the keys jangling, looking in the forest for E.T. You certainly, I know in Taken, that was a clear, it went generations, but the government's cover-up went generations. So he's doing it again. He obviously, it's kind of ironic because people think, well, Steven Spielberg is, he's a tool of the government and he's helping to get across the disclosure narrative. I doubt the government, if they were, had Spielberg as their marionette, would be saying, and by the way, make us look like the bad guys. So I don't know. I don't know where we're actually going with this thing, but I'm all in on watching it, and I really can't wait. I think it'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is the movie I wanted him to make now. I feel like this is the spiritual successor to Close Encounters, right? I've seen online people saying, "Oh, this is Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind," where there is intentional. It's not contact. It's not an abduction, which is Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. It's an intentional meeting between aliens and humans, and I think that's what this movie is about. And as I said, how much actual disclosure is woven into this? Does Steven Spielberg know more than most people? That's actually something we discuss a little bit in Sound, Light, and Frequency. That's hard to know, but clearly, I think given who he is and the intrigue of this trailer, it's going to get a lot of attention and it's going to become a discussion point. And I think if nothing else, it's going to help people imagine what disclosure will be like, right? It's a trial run, right? You get to go in and live through the movie experience and say, oh, I kind of have a sense of what this would be like if it happened, right? Which makes it a little bit easier for when it does.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we started by, I think we've done the best we can with taking a look at
Yes.
a 2-minute trailer. Our show is about 30 times as long as the trailer, so that's probably a good ratio. The one thing I wanted to just end with is we are going to be doing a show called Sound, Light, and Frequency. And Brent, I'm so happy to have your partnership on that, and I really think we might break some new ground with it. And for those of you thinking about it, you'll be able to find it where all podcasts are sometime in the early part of 26. It is being produced by iHeart Podcasts, and my company Stellar Productions is one of the production company, or is the production company on it. We've got 36 episodes, and we just wanted to give you guys a little taste if you're listening or watching us. We do a first episode about that party crasher that Brent was talking about earlier in the show. But our second episode is actually called Mr. Close Encounters, and of course is about the man of the hour, Steven Spielberg. So we prepared just a little clip where we pulled some of the discussion that comes from that second episode where we're talking about Spielberg and all of the stuff. And so we're going to play that now, and we'll come back and say goodbye. So let's go to that. This year, I got to have lunch at Jacques Vallée's apartment, of all things. And
I'm so envious.
It was such a cool thing. I mean, to think, well, first of all, his lovely wife made lunch for us. I mean, that was pretty cool. But apropos of Close Encounters, because it's hard not to talk to him about it, what everyone needs to understand is there is a character in Close Encounters, the French scientist Lacombe. And Lacombe is played by the great French director Francois Truffaut.
Played very well, by the way.
Played incredibly well. He grounds it. I think that's Spielberg's, crowning accomplishment in casting.
Yeah.
He had to screw up his courage to ask him, and he said yes. And he came and said, I don't need to be a director here. I'm an actor. And he acted the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Did a great job. But that character was certainly inspired by Jacques Vallée. So people have asked Jacques about this all the time. So, I'm not going to go to his house and not ask him. So I did say, what's your take on being portrayed in film? And I bet that was kind of cool. And of course, he's got that smile. And of course, it was cool. He loved it. Yeah. But the thing that he said and has said consistently is the ending is a little too positive for him based on the evidence that he has seen in his ongoing investigations. He's not saying that it's completely wrong. He's just saying there's a darker side to what he has seen in the people and the witnesses he's talked to. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It also mirrors something that the great UFO researcher Stanton Friedman said. Stanton also felt that. It's hard not to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind and say, what a great freaking movie this is. It's not a documentary. Mm-hmm. It's a movie.
Right.
And so Stanton felt very much like Jacques Vallée, which is, it's great ending, it's fun, but there's another side to all this.
Well, speaking of another side to all of this, and going back to this concept of firsts, I think this is the other aspect of Close Encounters we want to talk about outside the movie, everything surrounding the movie. So in the topic of firsts, I want to bring up a friend and a colleague who you, of course, know because we both worked with them as the director on our Dark Skies pilot, our 2-hour pilot. That's Tobe Hooper. Just to give a little context here, I was friends with Tobe because we were working on an independent movie, developing it a couple years prior. And when we were looking for directors for the Dark Skies pilot, we hit on Tobe and everyone got excited about Tobe. Of course, Tobe had done, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Poltergeist, where he worked with Steven Spielberg. And apparently he and Steven were very good friends. So here's a very interesting story that goes back to when we were scouting locations for the Dark Skies pilot. We were up in the Newhall Ranch area, which is north of Los Angeles up in the hills. And we were looking for an area where we could shoot our crop circle sequence. We had in the Dark Skies pilot, there's a big crop circle, right, that is the main character finds and has a whole interesting experience with. And so at the end of the day, after we had scouted this whole area, the small production group went down to like kind of a roadhouse restaurant. And because I had previously been friends with Tobe, I sat aside with him while everyone else was talking about logistics and whatnot. And he had told me before that he and Steven were really good friends, but they were very competitive, right? Especially when it came to film. And I had said to him over dinner, you're going to finally beat Steven in something. You're going to be the first one to put a crop circle on film, because despite everything Steven had done up until that point, he had not done that. And Toby kind of chuckled and said, yeah, I mean, but I'll never be ahead of Steven in this category. And I was like,
Well, there's Toby Hooper talking again. And by the way, there is more to that Toby Hooper story. Not to be a big tease, but we don't want to spoil our own new show. So we will be telling you that story about Toby Hooper, who was a great guy. I mean, I was really proud to get to know him. And Brent, you knew him ahead of time. And we'll be telling you a lot more about, I mean, Spielberg, frankly, because of his importance in this whole world of showbiz, UFOs, and secrecy, he's kind of a continuing character in our series.
Yes. Yeah. He is a recurring character because we examine a lot of the movies that he either made or was involved in, movies and TV shows. So it's very fitting that we used this trailer to introduce Sound, Light, and Frequency.
Absolutely. It's a mouthful, Sound, Light, and Frequency, but hopefully we'll all learn how to say it together. So Brent Friedman, thank you very much for being here on Need to Know. Love it. I think it's a lively show itself, but boy, I can't wait to be doing Sound, Light, and Frequency. See, I just did that.
You did
Sound,
it. See?
Light,
it's
and
contagious.
Frequency.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So we're happy you're all here. We hope your holidays are wonderful, and we'll be seeing you all in the new year. So watch the skies. We'll see you soon.
Happy holidays, everyone.
So Brent, I want you to know how bad I feel that you've been without power for days, and God knows with the generators and everything. So in honor of that, I've driven 15 minutes from my house to